Her thoughts turned to the old house, the creaking floors, the thick air that seemed to hold its breath in the night. It wasn't just the house itself that was cursed, it was everything in it, everything Mr. Aldrich had touched. And now, it seemed like the curse had chosen Elijah. Ayana knew there was no time to waste. She had to act fast, or the house would claim her son just like it had claimed so many others before him. Her pulse raced as she surveyed the room, her eyes landing on the journal she had discovered earlier in the library. It had been hidden in the back of an old bookshelf, with pages that seemed to tremble under the weight of its own secrets. Ayana had glanced at it briefly, but now it seemed like the only key to unlocking the mystery of Mr. Aldrich's pact. She rushed to the desk and grabbed the journal, her hands trembling. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the cryptic words and sketches. Each page seemed to reveal another piece of the puzzle, but none of it made sense. Symbols, incantations, and references to an ancient force, the journal seemed to be a roadmap to the terror that had gripped the house. But where was the part about breaking the pact? Where was the part that could save Elijah? Ayana's thoughts were interrupted when she heard a soft knock at the door. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't heard anyone enter. Elijah? Ayana called softly, but there was no response. She crept toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Slowly, she opened it. The figure standing before her was not her son. It was a man, tall and shadowed, with a dark, hollow stare that sent a wave of nausea over her. His face was gaunt, his skin pale, and his clothes old, like something out of a nightmare. But what struck Ayana most was his presence. It was as though he was not truly human, like he was an apparition born of something far darker. "You can't save him," the man's voice echoed in the stillness of the room, sending a chill through her veins. "He belongs to the house now. Just like I did." Ayana recoiled in fear. "Who are you?" The man smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was a twisted, cruel smile, as though he took pleasure in her fear. "I was once Mr. Aldrich's servant. But now, I'm part of the house, just like him." Ayana's blood ran cold. She had heard of people who had gone missing in this house, people who had lived there, only to vanish without a trace. This man was one of them, consumed by the house's curse, now reduced to a mere shadow of his former self. "What do you want?" Ayana asked, trying to steady her voice. "I want you to accept the truth," the man said, stepping closer. "There's no escaping the curse. There's no defeating it. It's already too late for your son. You should have left when you had the chance." Ayana's mind reeled. She couldn't let this be the end. Not now. Not when she had already come this far. "You're wrong," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "I will save Elijah. I will break the pact." The man's smile faltered. For a brief moment, Ayana saw a flicker of something, maybe regret, maybe fear, in his eyes. But it quickly vanished. "You don't understand. The pact is bound to blood. Your blood. Elijah's blood. You can't escape it." Ayana swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. Blood. The pact was tied to her family. To her son. But there had to be a way out. There had to be a way to break free from this nightmare. With a surge of desperation, Ayana slammed the door shut in the man's face, bolting it behind her. She turned back to Elijah, whose vacant eyes stared up at her, as though the boy she knew had already left. Her heart ached with a deep, unbearable sorrow. She couldn't let this happen. She wouldn't. Ayana dropped to her knees beside Elijah, holding his cold hand in hers. "I love you, Elijah. I will do whatever it takes to protect you," she whispered, as the weight of the house's curse pressed down upon her like an unseen force. She glanced down at the journal in her hands, flipping it open to a page that seemed to glow with an eerie light. There, in the corner of the page, was the final piece of the puzzle, a ritual. A ritual that could break the pact, but at a cost. Ayana's heart pounded as she read the words. The blood of the mother must be spilled, but only after a promise has been made. The pact will break when the sacrifice is complete, and the child is freed. But beware, the price of breaking the pact is not just life. It is the soul. Ayana's breath caught in her throat. The ritual would free Elijah, but it would cost her everything. Her life. Her soul. Everything she had ever known. But there was no choice. Elijah was the only thing that mattered. Ayana stood frozen in the dim light of the room, staring at the ritual in the journal. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and her vision blurred with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and determination. The words on the page seemed to echo in her mind, each syllable ringing with the weight of a terrible choice. The blood of the mother must be spilled. Could she do it? Could she sacrifice herself to save her son? The very thought felt like a betrayal, yet she knew deep down that there was no other way. This house had already taken so much from her. Her fear, her sanity, even her strength, it was all being drained by the malevolent force lurking within these walls. But she could not, and would not, let it take Elijah too. She turned her gaze to her son, lying unconscious on the floor, his face pale, his breath shallow. The darkness that had taken hold of him was consuming him from the inside out. She could feel it in the air, the presence, the evil, that had been watching her from the shadows, waiting for her to make this very choice. Ayana squeezed Elijah's hand. "I love you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll do whatever it takes." The air in the room grew colder, and the whispers returned, more insistent this time. "It's too late. You cannot fight fate. The pact is eternal." Ayana ignored the whispers, clutching the journal tighter. She had no more time. The curse was closing in on her, on them both, and there was no escape unless she broke the pact. She knew that the ritual would be dangerous, perhaps fatal, but it was the only chance they had. In that moment, Ayana made a decision. She would not let the house win. She had already lost so much, her peace, her security, but she would not lose her son. Not now. The ritual had to be completed in the heart of the house, the basement. The very place where Mr. Aldrich had made his dark pact all those years ago. It was the only place that could sever the connection between the house and its curse, but it would also be the place where Ayana's fate would be sealed. She picked Elijah up, her arms trembling under the weight of him. Her legs wobbled as she made her way toward the basement door, each step bringing her closer to the inevitable. The house groaned around her, as though it were alive, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord, reaching out toward her. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Ayana reached the basement door and hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the cold knob. The whispers grew louder, as if trying to stop her, trying to pull her away from the path she had chosen. "You cannot win. You cannot escape. The house has you." But Ayana did not listen. She opened the door and stepped into the darkness below. The basement was cold and damp, the walls lined with stone that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. In the center of the room was a circle drawn in blood, a symbol that seemed to shimmer with dark power. Ayana's breath hitched as she took in the sight, the realization of what was about to happen settling like a heavy weight in her chest. She placed Elijah in the center of the circle, his body still and limp. Her heart ached as she gazed down at him, the boy she had carried for so long, the boy who was now the key to breaking the curse. She opened the journal to the final page, her eyes scanning the incantation. There was no turning back now. The whispers became deafening, filling her ears, drowning out everything else. "You will never escape. You will never leave." Ayana took a deep breath and began to chant the words from the journal. The room seemed to tremble as the air thickened with energy. The shadows around her writhed, and she could feel the dark presence closing in, its cold fingers brushing against her skin. But she held steady, her voice growing stronger with each word. As she spoke the final phrase of the incantation, the ground beneath her feet cracked, and the air was filled with a sharp, bone-chilling wind. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse with rage, swirling around her and Elijah, as if trying to tear them apart. But Ayana did not falter. She closed her eyes and pressed her hands to her chest, feeling the weight of her decision in every fiber of her being. She had made her choice. She would give everything for Elijah. And then, as if in response to her sacrifice, the ground began to quake, and a blinding light erupted from the center of the circle. The air grew thick with power, and Ayana could feel the curse breaking, the dark energy unraveling around her. But the cost was too great. As the light consumed her, Ayana felt her body begin to fade, her soul slipping away. The pain was unbearable, but it was also strangely peaceful. She knew she had done what she needed to do. She had saved Elijah. And then, as quickly as it had started, the light faded, leaving only silence in its wake. When Ayana opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the basement. The darkness had lifted, and the oppressive weight that had filled the house for so long was gone. The air was clear, the shadows no longer twisted and malevolent. She felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt since before they had moved into the house. She stood up slowly, her body light, as though the burden of the curse had been lifted from her shoulders. She looked around the room, and to her amazement, Elijah was awake, sitting up in the center of the circle. "Elijah," she whispered, rushing to his side. Her son looked up at her, his eyes wide and filled with confusion. But there was no darkness in them now. No trace of the evil that had gripped him before. "Mom?" Elijah asked, his voice weak but full of relief. "What happened?" I don't remember." Ayana smiled, tears of relief flooding her eyes. "You're free, Elijah. You're safe now. We're both safe." The house, which had once been filled with an oppressive evil, now felt like a home again, a place of peace and safety. Ayana knew that the curse had been broken, that the house had finally been freed from the dark force that had held it in its grip for so long. She looked at Elijah, her heart swelling with love. She had done it. She had saved him. And in doing so, she had saved herself. They had won. As Ayana held Elijah in her arms, the house seemed to exhale, as though it too had been waiting for this moment. The oppressive weight that had lingered for so long had been lifted. The curse was gone, and the house was finally at peace. And for the first time in a long while, Ayana felt hope, the hope that no darkness, no curse, could ever take away. The end. Thank you for watching The Haunting of a Mother's Strength. Will she survive the terror lurking at home? We hope you enjoyed this chilling tale of love, courage, and survival. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest stories. Check out the videos appearing on your screen for more spine-tingling content. See you next time.